Welcome to the SNN Network Canada virtual event. I'd like to introduce our next presenter, George Achilleos, President and COO of Nurosene. George, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to our story today. I'm always excited to tell the story, and I want to start really with all the great people that we've got involved and I have the pleasure of working with. In particular here, Ranj Bath, our CEO, and also the Dan Gallucci, who is the co-founder of this business and is a functional neurologist who is at the nexus of really what I think is going to be a revolution in the world of mental health and wellness and performance. And then Dr. Joe Geraci, who was the CEO of Metromark, a company we acquired, and now is our Chief Scientific Officer. Further to that, we do also have a support from an unbelievable group of amazing people, Dr. Luca Pani, Raja, who is Chief Marketing Communication Officer at MasterCard, et cetera. Lots of great people to support this. I'm on a tight timeline, so I want to make sure I really have enough time to really tell the story here. So let's get started. So where this really starts is why Nurosene? And our vision is to help people live healthier, happier, and longer lives, and we're going to do this by starting a performance and wellness revolution. But before we really get into it, I really just want to tell a story that came from our co-founder, Dan Gallucci, who's a functional neurologist and worked with some of the best athletes in the world in the areas of pro sports such as football, hockey. So you could imagine, here's a guy that's working with people and athletes who are getting their heads smashed. And what he would do is he would run them under the scanner and take a look at their brains. And as you can imagine, he would see core neural networks that weren't really functioning very well within their brain. So that's all great. But where I got really excited, where I really got to join in on Nurosene was when he told me, you know, George, what I did was I took what I thought were healthy kids and started running them through the scanner. And what I realized was that they actually had neural networks that weren't functioning properly. So just think about this for a moment. You have what appear to be healthy individuals with dysfunctional underlying brain biology. This is the fundamental ethos of what we're trying to do at Nurosene and what I'm going to try to run you through today. So what are we going to do? We're going to restore and evolve the self-organizing and interconnected nature of the brain. This sounds fancy, but really what we're talking about is getting these core neural networks, and there are many in your brain, and get those neural networks to begin to function properly again. And this will have an impact on important human conditions and goals. Things like health and wellness, performance, mental health, self-improvement. These conditions and goals have a common element, and that common element is the brain. And that's what we're really all about here at Nurosene. Just a second, the slides load here. So what's the opportunity? If you really think about this, nobody has democratized access to the underlying brain biology. These industries, these conditions, these goals represent trillions of dollars and millions of people. So 1.5 trillion affected in the health and wellness market, 264 million people affected by mental health issues globally. We're talking about performance and self-improvement industries that are in the billions. Again, remember, these are all tied to the brain and the proper functionality of the brain. And the real opportunity exists fundamentally, is what we believe, is because if you look at the current performance and wellness apps, and I'm sure all of you use different kinds of apps, et cetera, but if you really think about it, these apps and technologies are making recommendations with no understanding of the underlying biology of the brain. Is there blood flow? Is there oxygen going to neural networks? Glucose, sugar, activation. What does this all look like? This is what we're going to be addressing. So it starts with an understanding of the underlying brain biology. Now, what I'm going to take you through here in the next slide is super critical, because what we think we've done here is captured our business model in 5 points. So we're really saying here is Nurosene is going to revolutionize how consumers approach their performance and wellness needs. And the word revolutionize is critical. It starts with the first bullet, which is this app. We feel we're building the world's first app that understands the underlying brain biology, and it's using what we call our in-app virtual neuroscan. I'm going to explain this in the coming slides because this is critical. So this virtual neuroscan, this version of our virtual neuroscan, speaks to 4 neural networks: brain adaptability, cognitive flexibility, working memory, and long-term memory. Remember, I said there are many other neural networks. But from a democratization perspective, what we're going to be delivering in the app is a process of exercises that we run you through. And you look at the middle of the screen, you'll see an app and it says starting your virtual neuroscan. What I'm going to really show you are some screenshots of what we're really talking about here. So there's exercises, memory recall exercises. Those exercises are there because Dan Bellucci, remember the functional neurologist who's the co-founder of the business, was using these exercises to work with the athletes that he was working with when they were out in remote areas playing their sports, et cetera. He had to have a way to touch base. So there were memory recall exercises. There were an assortment of imagination exercises, breath hold exercises, and these are all critical exercises that you run through in an intake process with our app. You can see them changing in the middle of the screen. These are critical exercises because they map to these 4 different neural networks and how they're functioning. So this is really fundamentally what we feel we're creating here through this virtual neuroscan is an understanding of the underlying brain biology in these 4 core neural networks. And then what's really cool is as you go through that process, you get to this screen, which basically tells you, here's how these neural networks are functioning. And it would say to me, George, you know, your working memory is at this, your long-term memories, this is how it's functioning, adaptability, cognitive flexibility. So you can really see, wow, some of these neural networks aren't functioning great. This is an issue. You can't just say to people, the solution for everything is meditation, et cetera. The answer is it depends. It depends on the interconnected nature with the brain and the underlying brain biology. And that's what we're really addressing here. And that's what we feel is revolutionary. You'll also see you'll get a neuro stress curve score. And this is where we're going to be essentially telling you, here's where you sit on your stress curve. You're overly stressed. You're under stress. You're in a caution mode. You should be able to do things. And what we're going to do out of that, which is really cool, is we're not only going to assess the underlying brain biology, but we're also then going to tell you, hey, we're going to create these neuro brain flow exercises. It's not going to be the same for everybody. It's going to depend on how you score. And essentially what it's going to tell you is, here's your 2-minute daily neuro brain flow. So these are exercises that you will do each and every day to specifically improve these neural networks that aren't functioning very well. Now, what's critical about this is that this all then ties to what we are building underneath this, which is essentially an ecosystem. So you're going to do these, you're going to do the virtual neuroscan. We're then going to give you recommendations. And if you look at point number 3, what this all means is we build a population data set. Every single person that downloads this app and onboards onto this app becomes part of our population data set, and we understand the neural connectivity and the neural functionality of these thousands of people that download our app. We own this advanced population data set. Now, why is this important? Well, one of the things that we did over the last months was we acquired a company called Netramark, which is an AI company that specifically works mainly in the pharma space. And it's able to ingest population data set, and then it's able to say, hey, you know what? Here's some opportunities to create these precision drugs or nutraceuticals. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this population data set that we own, we run it through our own algorithms at Netramark, and then we're able to say, hey, here's some candidates for a drug, and I'll describe what these are in a moment, for drug resurrection, drug repurposing, and new molecule invention. And then we're going to partner with companies who are then going to take it through the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 commercialization process to bring drugs to market. So I want to be clear here. We are not a pharma development company. We will not be spending money on running drugs through this process. We will have a carried interest. So what's really great about this is it's like a call option. It's like we essentially identify a potential drug, allow somebody else to run it through that process, and along the way, because we have this carried interest, we are going to able to potentially garner a transaction value out of identifying these candidates. These 5 points, essentially, this is our business plan. And it all works through what I call an advanced ecosystem. And that's what I'm going to take you through next. So, and I've explained most of this already as far as the ecosystem, but I want to run you through it visually. So as I said, we're going to be ingesting data, active data, passive data collection. This could be through Apple Health Kit, things like that. We're going to do this virtual neuroscan. I ran you through all the slides so you can understand what that process looks like in app. And then what we're going to do is essentially run you through this virtual neuroscan that will tell you about these 4 neural networks, and I'll make an assessment based on that. So what I've actually added on here, though, is another interesting piece. We're also working on an advanced virtual neuroscan. The reason that's important is because that unlocks upwards of another 11 neural networks. So this is basically saying the democratized piece is the virtual neuroscan. Everybody can come onto the app for free, do the virtual neuroscan, understand how these core neural networks are working, but then we've got a paywall that says if you want to do the advanced virtual neuroscan and get up to 15 neural networks and understand how those are all working and what you need to do, there's going to be a $6 paywall. And so you'll see how that'll work as we continue to go through our model. So as I said, this then leads to an assessment, which is your brain function score, your stress curve, and your neural network assessments, as I explained in the earlier slides. Now, the last piece in this neuro app platform are the actions. Here's what we're actually going to tell you to do to improve these neural networks. I think I've harped on that enough. The other piece then to this that's super important is, okay, George, that sounds great, but how are you going to drive people into this neuro app platform? We have 3 go-to-market channels. One's called direct to consumer, which is what it actually sounds like. We go direct to the consumers to get them to say, hey, this neuro thing's really cool. I should become part of that tribe and download the app. Neuro 1 is us going to corporations. It's the same app, just going to corporations so that we can help corporations understand the stress of their organization, the neural functionality of the employees that work at that corporation and making actionable recommendations to them. And then Neuro Pro is going through with sports teams and doing the same thing. So that all sounds great. The next real question is, how are we going to actually accomplish this? What's really cool is I've had the privilege of working with these gentlemen over the previous years. These are icons of industry when it comes to marketing. They've helped launch brands like Michael Jordan's brand, Air Jordan globally, Tiger Woods, NBA, Ray-Ban, HBO, Oculus. These are some of the global icons in the marketing and branding space. These are the gentlemen that we're working with to help bring the traffic into these inbound channels and make this ecosystem a reality. As I then spoke to earlier as well, what we do is, I think hopefully now I've created a clear picture of the app, the inbound channels, and the marketing, and now we have this population data set, which I'm calling this Nurosene Advanced Population Data Set. That then creates this outbound data set that we then populate through Netramark, which is the acquisition I referenced earlier, which allows us essentially to then use those algorithms to come up with drug resurrection, repurposing, and new molecule invention quickly. Drug resurrection means a drug that has failed a clinical trial for whatever reason. It might have been for an assortment of issues with which our algorithms can identify so that we can point that drug at a different disease. Drug repurposing means, hey, we've got this drug that works for diabetes over here, and maybe we can use it for ALS over there. We're able to identify that using this advanced population data set. And new molecule invention, which is a net new molecule that we can identify that we can then start to target and work with a pharma company to create a new drug that we could bring to market. All of these identifications become part of the Nurosene drug IP portfolio. Essentially, us having this carried interest, which I'll explain shortly here, around how we can monetize that interest. We think this is a massive competitive advantage. If you look at many of our competitors, they do not have an understanding of the underlying brain biology. They're not making core neural network assessments and understanding, and they aren't making actionable assessments of here's what you should actually do, and they certainly don't have carried interest in drug portfolios, et cetera. And this is part of our differentiator. So these are our assets from a neuro app perspective and from a Netramark perspective. I'm not going to go into details on those at this point in time. But what I want to make sure now is we start talking about where the rubber meets the road. How do we monetize? What do these revenue models look like? As I mentioned, from the app, we have 3 channels, direct-to-consumer, Neuro 1, Neuro Pro. And the things we're going to measure are cumulative downloads, monthly active users, and monthly recurring revenue rates from our subscription model. And then we've talked about Netramark and the IP portfolios, et cetera. So let's start talking some numbers here. So in March, we begin our campaign rollout. Our expectation is, and we've built out the underlying models around this, is 15,000 downloads in the first month with a monthly active user rate of 5,000. And as I start to work through this, you'll start to see monthly recurring rev rates and revenue rates and future 12-month revenue projections. So you can see at 6 months, we're at 30,000 number of downloads, 130,000 cumulative downloads, 20,000 monthly active users, et cetera, and a future rolling 12-month revenue rate of $3.3 million. Now, all these values are in US, and you can see where we get at 12 months. You can see where the levering up occurs, the cumulative downloads, the monthly active users, et cetera, very powerful. And as we do this campaign rollout in March, we'll be verifying all the underlying metrics around cost per install, customer acquisition costs, monthly active user percentages, et cetera. So at a core, that's what some of the metrics look like as far as ingestion into our app ecosystem. But here's where the magic really begins. If you really think about this at a high level, 100% have completed this virtual neuroscan. So imagine 15,000, 130,000, 500,000 people that have potentially done this virtual neuroscan. For most app companies, the cumulative download number can be a bit of a throwaway because what you care about are monthly active users because that relates to monthly recurring revenue. But for us, because we also have this underlying Netramark asset, we're able to take all of those cumulative downloads and create this advanced population data set. And now I'm going to talk about what that translates into. So what that means is as you take a drug that you identify this candidate, you have to take it through this process, preclinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, et cetera. And what we're doing, our model is to partner with parties who are going to take it through that process. Remember, we're not a pharma company. We're going to have a carried interest in these transactions, in these candidates as they go along. So what this means is if the partner that we work with gets to first dose phase 1, we have a 35% interest if they turn around and sell that drug to a pharma company that's going to actually commercialize it. 15% as it goes on because there's millions of dollars required to get these drugs to market, and 10% if you get to first dose phase 3. So that's our carried interest on transaction value. The other beautiful thing is we expect that we'll get milestone payments along the way, even if there isn't a transaction to a commercializing third party, which means if we get to first dose phase 1, we get paid $750,000, $250,000 preclinical, $500,000 in phase 1, et cetera. You can see these amounts move up as we move along. So we get milestone payments along the way, and then we get a transaction value if a third-party pharma company comes along and says, I'm taking this to commercialization because the results look great. So then the next part of this is, well, what do those transaction values look like? You can see it, preclinical and IND, it's about 16 million. If you get all the way to commercialization, it could be 965 million. Those are the net present values. And then this is what the transaction looks like to value to Nurosene. So on the one extreme, 45% of the 16 million is 7.2 million. So what this really means to us is if there's a transaction somewhere along the curve, you can see what the value to Nurosene is at the bottom. If there isn't a transaction, we get milestone payments along the way, and the cost to Nurosene is 0. So this is like a call option for us to get a carried interest. But what we're doing is doing a lot of the heavy lifting by identifying the candidate by using our Nurosene advanced population data set. The other great thing is that the clinical trial process can be complicated and expensive, and one of the ways you de-risk it is by identifying the right population data set, and we also have those algorithms within our Netramark algorithms, which means along the way we might also take a clip. Those average deal size look around 150,000, so these can be very powerful ways for us to make additional cash along the way as this commercialization process happens. The last thing I want to just touch on here is partnership population data analysis. This basically says, look, there are lots of companies out there that have massive population data sets. A lot of them are in the activity world, the exercise world, and they're trying to figure out what to do with this population data. That's one of the other magics that we're we're capable of doing with Netramark, which is ingesting these population data sets, providing insights. And if we can prove some of these transactions out, then that becomes super valuable because we would take a skiff every time our algorithms are pinged. So at a high level, this is the monetization model of the app. These are the carried interest drug IP portfolio numbers, and these are based on discussions that came along with Netramark, et cetera. So these are really, really powerful ways for us to make money. Super excited about this. I really feel this is one of those opportunities that doesn't come along in many people's lives. And there's two benefits to this. Number one, this can be a great way essentially to create value for shareholders. But the other great thing that also attracted me to this is we're actually helping people. We can help people with neurological issues. We can attack issues like mental health and wellness, et cetera, and make a difference in the world and a difference in people's lives. This is an amazing opportunity. I'm super excited, hopefully, and I think you can probably tell from my voice as I am a little bit excited. These are some of the delivery milestones that go underneath that, which is completion of this virtual neuroscan, which we will have completed by the end of February, which will allow us to bring this revolutionary third version of this app. We've had this app out, we've made a lot of learnings, but what we really come back to is these neural networks, et cetera, and so that's why this proprietary virtual neuroscan is so critical. Working on these targeted campaigns so that when we launch in March, we're able to do that. As I mentioned about 6 to 8 weeks ago, I think now the time goes by fast, we acquired Netramart and all their algorithms. We've been busy integrating this. We're looking at making some of our first additions into our carried interest drug IP portfolio in the coming future and potentially ingest large population data sets. Then as you get into the new year, we're rolling out our app. We're verifying our customer acquisition cost, our cost per install costs. We're working on our advanced virtual neuroscan, continuing to add into our IP portfolio. You get into April and beyond, we launch some of our efforts into Neuro One and Neuro Pro, which is our corporate clients and our pro sports teams clients. And then we also launch all our monthly recurring revenue items. So I'm just kind of winding down to the end. I've got a few more minutes, and then I'm happy to take some questions. This is essentially just a quick view at our cap table, common shares, warrants, stock options, and what we look like on a fully diluted basis. The other thing that's really cool is if you've been following Nurosene at all, you'll see that we've been featured by a lot of unbelievable news outlets, Business Insiders, Forum, Bloomberg, CNBC, probably seen our CEO and a bunch of these outlets getting really great coverage and response. Again, really excited. And one of the other things I want to feature on here, which is really great, is Michael Phelps. Hopefully you guys are all familiar with Michael Phelps, one of the, I think, the most decorated historian, Olympian of all time. He's on our Mental Health Advisory Council, and it's this great quote, "It's okay to not be okay." And I think you're seeing this a lot from a sports figures perspective, where people are coming out now, people that you would think are on top of the world but are having mental health issues, et cetera. And this is what I said. Yes, I think there's a lot of financial gains to be made in this company, but I think the other great thing that we're doing here is making a difference in people's lives and making a difference in the world. That's what really excites me. And with that, I think I've done a speed record in getting through our presentation deck in 23 minutes. The brain is a muscle that can move the world. We are focused on the brain and becoming an underlying brain biology company. That's the presentation. I'll take any questions. I'll take a quick look here. It looks, have you developed a relationship with universities for their tech transfer and development? We're in all sorts of negotiations, discussions with all sorts of affiliated organizations, et cetera. And actually, I'll go to this slide right here. You can see some of the groups that we've been in discussions with, whether it's Ontario Brain Institute, Queen's University, et cetera. So the answer to that is there's all sorts of discussions going on. This is a complex matter, that being the brain. There's all sorts of frontiers to uncover here. This is a very, very exciting space, and I really look forward to being part of this. Are there any other questions? I think hopefully the other one I see here is, what is your vision for the company for the next 12 months? Hopefully, I think I've articulated what that looks like. I don't know if there are any other questions. I don't have any at this point. Angie, back to you.
The operator should come on shortly and close out the presentation if there are no more questions.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you guys giving me 30 minutes of your lives to let you know a little bit about what Nurosene's up to. Have a great day.
Thank you, George.
This concludes
Thank you
today's
very much.
presentation. Thank you for tuning in.